spent as my mother's personal assistant. In the kitchen, in the laundry, in caring for the house, in taking care of the children. That was, apart from going to school, of course, that was the rest of my day. But again, even as a 9-year-old girl, I mean, I had dreams. I remember then we were living in Lagos. When I was 9, we were actually living on Bankole Street at Olowo. And I mean, my bed at that point, was facing that, I could see the former UTC light, up there from my bed. And I used to have this dream then that, of being in that shop. We go to that shop quite regularly as a child. And I saw myself as a girl who is going to sit in a boardroom. I mean, I knew at that point in time I was going to sit in a boardroom. I didn't even know exactly what a boardroom was in the totality. But, because I was surrounded by such enterprises, I remembered clearly I had this vision of me wearing my cap, my hat, dressed in a corporate outfit and having a hat on and going into a boardroom. But what exactly that was all about, I think I must have picked up from there on TV or something. I don't even know where that word came from at the age of 9. So that was it for me.
Interesting. And the way it is, the dream you had at the age of 9, even though you didn't know what a boardroom was, you practically live that out, serving with UNICEF, because what else is UNICEF, which is even more than, is a global influence. Your influence was able to cut across more than just an organization, but an international organization, so to speak, and which you're able to influence nations, influence policies, influence governments. So in actual fact, the dream really came to pass. Wouldn't you say that?
Oh, absolutely. The dream came to pass. I mean, I worked with UNICEF for 15 years, and with the scheme of the way, and for about a year, I headed the office as at the sub office in Lagos for 1 year. And in that space, I was acting as a representative for the Southwest Nigeria, and it meant that I had to be part of interministerial committee meetings. And in that capacity, also as the staff of UNICEF, I met with governors and leaders in deciding policies and in facilitating training activities. And today, I'm in a couple of boards. I'm in the foundation, the Feet of Grace Foundation. I sit on the board of Seat of Grace Foundation, and I sit on the board of another enterprise. So it's a dream that has come true. Even though at 9-year-old, I had no clue what exactly that was all about. My journey to coming to where I am today was not exactly how I would have envisaged it, but destiny and where God wanted me to be.
Excellent. Wow. Interesting. So, Ma, we're looking at, our topic is sparking creativity. And you might be wondering, why sparking creativity? The Mentor Show came out of during the COVID pandemic. I was supposed to have a plan of going to Botswana to have conference for young people to put them together. Now COVID happens and now we cannot go. Then God said, why not start an Instagram show? And that's where today is what? Today is actually 10th. By the 14th, which is on Saturday, actually, we'll make it 2 years that we'll be running the Mentor Show online. Initially, we started every Tuesday and every Friday, every Tuesday and Friday, but late last year, we made it only on Tuesday. So the point I'm making is we're looking at the COVID came and it seems to ground everybody and seems to collapse everybody. And there was that need for people to now begin to think of sparking creativity.
And in that space, I was acting as a representative for the Southwest Nigeria, and it meant that I had to be part of interministerial. For me, I think that creativity is a gift of God. It's part of my DNA as a child of God, as someone who was created in the image of a creative God. And I believe that there is an essence of creativity that is deposited in every human being. that finds expression in, in different ways. Now, it's about letting that flow out of us and see how it expresses itself. I have found, each of us have a gift to be creative. We have the essence of creativity in us. The issue is, do we allow it to flow out of us? Do we seek to discover it? Do we seek to develop it? And do we seek to deploy it? And for me, creativity has manifested in diverse ways, and it's not only in when we are able to do artistic work that we think that we are creative. I believe that our creativity can have expressions even with us. Our creativity can have expressions in the writing world. I was trained as a scientist. Today I do creative writing. I speak creatively. And I do creative work with my hands. And and there are things that I discovered about myself when I was going through the pleasures of life. And in the midst of the pleasures of life, when I had to transit from being a full-time scientist, nutritional scientist, in the 7 years in between before I came back to living, lots of things that were stored in me that I didn't realize was there were pressed out in the pleasure of life. I always knew that I love writing. Everybody knows that, I scribble a lot. But when I had to stop working and went from a 26-hour schedule to a zero blank agenda, where all I could do was to manage my health, I found that I actually had the gift of creative writing. And when I found that, I didn't just let it go. I took time to develop it, and now I'm deploying it. After spending 119 days in the hospital, and I was asking myself, what next am I going to do? Both legs have been amputated. What can I do with my hand? I wanted something more, and I was praying and asking God. And the idea to start the Hands of Grace creations was actually birthed while I was in the hospital. And I learned to bead in the hospital because it's actually a testimony of my hands coming back to life, because both hands were going to be amputated along with both legs. But my legs did not come back, and both legs were amputated, but my hands came back. And I was determined that I was going to continue to write, and I wanted to do more. If God returned my hands back to life and they were not amputated, I'm going to do something much more. Well, then, and there goes the flair of being an artistic creator. But it was all there, but life circumstances pulled it to the surface. So there are stuff that are embedded in us that we may not actually, discover until things happen to us that pushes them to the surface. And I think the first thing and foremost, the truth that we need to imbibe, that every one of us is gifted. There is absolutely no one that God is left empty-handed. The issue is, do you put yourself in an environment that helps you to be able to discover the giftings in you, your creativity, what essence of creativity that is in you, and how you go further to develop it and begin to deploy it. It takes hard work, but it's rewarding.
It's rewarding. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the key point our guest is making is that you, like we also other guests who have been on this show, have always been emphasizing, each person you are creative because you are of God. So something is in you. And I like the way our guest tonight put it. She put the 3 Ds, the issue of you need to discover it, you need to develop it, and you need to deploy it. So, and she, like you said, like she was mentioning, it's like putting yourself in a pressure rice cooker to be able to discover what actually is in you. you need to, like our guest last week mentioned, the issue of looking for the dots in your life, in your experiences, or looking for the dots in your circumstances around you, and connecting those dots together to come up with something different. That was what our guest last week from Uganda, who is the Connect Initiative, told us. So it's Mr. Barrister Ugono. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that you can unleash a new and a part of you have never imagined. Like our guest tonight is telling you. So you must come to that point of belief that you can transition, you can pivot, you can go to a different thing, you can do something different. Like our guest, she's a scientist, but transitioning from scientist into creative writing, into looking for those aspects of her life. Wow, wonderful. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Ma, for that. Quickly, for you as a person, Ma, I know you've mentioned it, but I want you to just reinforce it again to us. What challenges have you gone through? How did you overcome them?
You will need a whole episode.
No, a whole episode.
To talk about my challenges. I'll just highlight them. First, I lived 20 years with a chronic respiratory disease that is called bronchiectasis and myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is a neurological disease. So the combination of these two made me cough every day, non-stop, for 20 years. And while that was going on, I mean, I was already married. I had my 2 sons, and I completed my PhD. I was working, but facing the challenges with my life, with my health, was a difficult one. I had to stop work in 2003 when I had to have the second surgery on my lungs. And then I went back to work again in Cairo in 2006. And in the midst of all of that in Cairo, my lungs became, my health and my lungs became weak again. And I became oxygen dependent. So 7 years on oxygen, 24/7. I had to have oxygen, external source of oxygen 24/7. I had to stop working completely and to stay at home from 2008. And then in January 2008, in 2010, my doctors told me that they had exhausted all medical options to keep me alive, to keep my lungs alive. And the only thing that was left was to have a lung transplant. And then I had to go through the whole work of being considered to be whether I was a suitable candidate for lung transplant or not. And because of all my medical history, eventually I got on the lung transplant list, and I had to wait for 3 years. At this time, I could no longer breathe for myself alone. I had to be on a ventilator in the night, and with the hours increasing because my lungs could just stop breathing. So 7 years on oxygen, 3 years on ventilator. I eventually had a lung transplant in April 2013 and was in coma because of the complications of the lung transplant for 5 weeks. And when I came out of coma, my doctors told me that even though I got very strong lungs, but I had severe complications in which my system shut down, and in the process, there was insufficient blood flow to my legs and my hands, and both hands and both legs have to be amputated. After living 20 years on a problem, and I mean, for me, the first thing was, what was the point of the strong lungs if I was going to be a quadruple amputee? But because I had a relationship with God, and I developed a very strong intimacy with God, that at this time I knew that nothing happens to me that was happens to.
I'm sorry I had to cut you. Now, I promised you we are going to end this 10 minutes to 8 because of your next appointment.
You can go on to the hour. I have made an adjustment to my timing, so I will start at the quarter of the hour.
Oh, thank you so much, Ma. Thank you. So you said you made a promise to God. That was what. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have the deep intimacy and relationship with God that requires me to listen to his voice even in the midst of my crisis. And the message that came to me, that was comforting, quote unquote, because it was a big, it had a big psychological impact on me that after 20 years of living with this disease, I was going to lose both legs and both hands. But God promised me He would give me the feet of grace that would take me to places my natural feet will not take me. And so I submitted, and both legs were amputated in June, on the 31st of May 2013. And then I began my rehabilitation process. My hands recovered. And it was in the process of learning how to walk again as a bilateral amputee that the idea to set up the Feet of Grace Foundation was birthed. Because I had to learn how to walk again. I knew how much it cost us to get my prosthetic limbs. I knew what it took to learn to live as an independent life as a bilateral amputee. And the question on my mind there was, what is happening to amputees in Nigeria? How are they coping? Who is helping them? And so we began the research. Even before by the time I came out of the hospital, I began the research. And long story short, we have the Feet of Grace Foundation today. And then the other part of my assignment was to continue to inspire hope. So I speak and write to inspire hope for people that it is possible for us to go through adversity and overcome them. And then on top of it, we can transform our pain to purpose, to power, and to profit. And that's what took me into going for certification as a trauma coach, so that I can help people, teach them, hold their hands to transform their pain to purpose. I believe that our pain will be wasted if we do not transform it to something that will benefit others and bring glory to God. I cannot afford to waste 20 years of my life or plus more. And so we have the Feet of Grace Foundation. We have Purpose Beyond the Pain, which is a coaching and a counseling and service provision, because I have gone for training as a trauma-informed specialist, so that I can position myself to help people who are going through adversity, painful experiences, and traumatic life situations, to see a reason to be hopeful, to keep hope alive, and to see how they can transform that thing that happened to them to something that is purposeful. I believe that nothing happens to us that catches us unawares, and I believe that my life is a living proof of that possibility, and that's why my book is called Grace in the Storms, a living proof of grace. And God's grace kept me through all that happened.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, the point our guest is saying tonight is, whatever you're going through, do not throw in the towel. Don't think of ending your life.
No.
Don't think of ending your life. The point our guest is telling us, she has given us another 3 P's. In the problem you are going through, you need to discover the purpose of the problem. You need to look for the power in that problem, and you need to make profit from even the problem that you are going through. In other words, turning your mess into a message, and finding purpose and finding hope, irrespective of the very hopeless situation that you might be going through. Don't give up. At least our guest tonight is an epitome, an example, a showcase, a masterpiece, so to speak, a showcase of God's grace, of the fact that you can go through challenging time and still come out smiling at the end of the day. It's not easy. Nobody promised that it's easy.
Absolutely not. I cannot tell you that it was an easy process, but I can look back today and tell you that it's been worth the journey.
It's very, quite interesting and insightful. And just looking back, I was just looking at, in the midst of, how did you cope for 20 years, coughing every day, going to work, waking up, going to work, giving birth, getting pregnant, giving birth to children, raising children, and still starting PhD, doing academic, going. How did you come with all this put together?
Simply by the grace of God. There's absolutely no other way you can go through all that without grace.
Mm.
There's absolutely, for me, no any way you can go through that without having a hope of a better future.
Mm.
And that has to be anchored on your faith in God.
Mm.
It was everything was anchored on my relationship with God.
Mm.
One thing that I learned very early, very early in my Christian work, in my journey, was that my pain would never be purposeless.
Your what?
Because the first verse, my pain will never be
Okay.
purposeless.
My pain will never be purposeless. Okay. All right.
Yeah, the first scripture verse that I memorized that I can read at the, even if you wake me up in the middle of the night, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, that blessed be the Father of all comforts, who comforts us in all our afflictions, that we may comfort others. That was in October 1984, and it has been the bedrock, my anchor in the storms of life. That there is a comfort for me to receive in. And what I have shared with you tonight is just the tiniest tip of the iceberg of what my life experiences has been. But there has been that grace that kept me, and that conviction that everything that I was going through is going to be transformed to something that will benefit another person. And if I keep my light of hope burning as I go through my dark tunnels of life, others will light their candle of hope from mine.
Excellent.
And that was the conviction that kept me going.
Wow. Now, Ma, as we round up this session, I want to thank you very much I know you are very busy and you have other sessions. I'm just thinking of the part of how would you, for someone who might be watching this and you're thinking that, okay, you're thinking that what you're going through is going to be of benefit to someone and God is strengthening you. How will you deal with the implication and the impact on people around you? Husband, wife, other people that might not be looking at it from your perspective. How would you deal with that?
I think first and foremost was that I married the right man who was willing to journey with me, because all of this started 1 year after we got married.
Wow.
And he respected the vows that he took, that it is for better, for worse. For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And he did not joke with his vows. So that is extremely important. Being committed to the vows, and having somebody in my life who was committed to his vows and who feared God. Because any other person would have walked out in the intensity of what we endured. He stayed on. My children were born into it. They grew up into it. It became a part of their lives. Was it challenging for them? It was. But my husband and I, we kept our home as stable as we could to minimize the impact on the children. Of course, as they became teenagers, it became obvious because I couldn't be everywhere they wanted me to be. Even though they were not ashamed of me carrying my oxygen bottles and my IV pump, they wanted me to be at their school events, but my health could not sustain some of this. And my older son had to take care of me when his father was not around. But the good thing at the end of the day is that our children became matured through what did not break them. They have become stronger through what did not break them. Both of them have graduated as engineers. And today, one is an electrical engineer, one is an electronic engineer, but they're not even practicing as engineers. They are pursuing their passion. One of them is pursuing photography and basketball. The second one is in Swiss military and in Peace Corps in Kosovo. And you could see that what could have broken them has strengthened them to become matured and strong men. My sons are 28 and 24, and by the grace of God, they're doing well. Did they struggle as teenagers? Yes. Did they go through the pain of watching their mother literally dying? Yes. But by the grace of God, we provided them a solid foundation that kept them going through those difficult times. And especially because both their father and I we're committed to keeping a solid home front for them.
Wow, wow, wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8 on the dot. On that note, we want to say thank you very much, Ma, for giving us, allowing us to have a peek, just a peek, like we already mentioned, the tip of the iceberg into what is behind Dr. Irene Titilayo Olumese.
Titilola.
Titilola, okay, Titilola Olumese. Thank you so much, Ma, for inspiring our people. And I know all those who have been on the show tonight and those that watch the replay of it will really appreciate and thank God that God, GS Institute is putting a thumb up, saying thank you so much for being.
That's one of the training institute I attended to become a trauma specialist.
Oh, interesting, interesting. So they are rooting for you. So thank you so much, Ma. And we've learned greatly. So, ladies and gentlemen, the point is you cannot afford to give up. You've got to find a way of discovering, developing, deploying your giftings and talents in spite of any area and challenges you have, and turn your mess into a message by finding the purpose in it, the power in it, and therefore profiting at the end of the day. So until we come your way again next week, I will say bye to everybody. So thank you very much, Ma. Bye.
Thank you very
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye. Bye.